Welcome to another edition of Around the Table with Stacy Smith. A week ago, the prognosticator Punxsutawney Phil saw his shadow and predicted 6 more weeks of winter. Well, political candidates never go into hibernation, and they're usually always just kind of wetting their finger and putting it to the wind to see which way the political winds are blowing. Well, those winds are now beginning to gain some strength as the days become fewer before the Pennsylvania primary. So now it is time for us to talk about politics with my regular group of analysts, and I'm going to introduce them to you now. And they are former Pennsylvania Governor Tom Corbett. Mr. Corbett also served as the state attorney general for the state of Pennsylvania and also as the U.S. attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania. And Tom also teaches law now at Duquesne University and practices law in the city of Pittsburgh. On the other side of me, you can see, is Jim Byrne. Jim is a former chairman of the state Democratic Party here in Pennsylvania. He also served as the president of Allegheny County Council and a longtime mayor of Millvale. Jim right now is an attorney here in town. As we go back around the table, we find another Republican, and that would be Keith Schmidt. Keith's background dates all the way back to the Reagan presidency, and Keith was the state director for former Pennsylvania Republican Senator Rick Santorum. Keith also was a consultant to Santorum's 2012 presidential campaign. Keith has his own consulting firm. And seated across the table is on the Democratic side is someone I like to call the great philosopher of around the table. That would be Joe Mystic. Joe is a guiding light for a lot of Democrats. He's consulted a lot of Democrats on their state campaigns. He also served in several different positions in city government, including that as deputy mayor. Joe teaches law at Duquesne University, and you can read his thoughts on politics and life in the Trib. So before we get into this year's political contest, I'd like to do this. Let's go back to something that happened here in Pittsburgh not long ago, the collapse of the Fern Hollow Bridge. Joe, I just mentioned that you write a column in the Trib. And in the past Sunday's column, you indicated that Pittsburgh Mayor Bill Peduto perhaps forgot that all politics is local.
Yeah, I don't think it was a revelatory column in that sense. Mayor Peduto has long been criticized for traveling the world. He was quite an international traveler. Instead of focusing on the basic needs of the citizens here in Pittsburgh, delivering essential services is the first duty of any mayor, and that involves filling potholes and plowing streets and making sure that your bridges are safe. These are at times not exciting tasks, but they are part and parcel of what a mayor is supposed to do. So the great Roman writer Seneca talked about premeditatio malorum, and he said that that's a key to a great leader. That's anticipating what can go wrong and preparing for it. And that's really essential for a big city mayor, or even a small town mayor. That did not happen here. Obviously, this is a city-owned bridge. It happened on former Mayor Peduto's watch. It's now laying at the bottom of a ravine. So I think it speaks for itself.
All right. Governor, you told us off camera one time that one of your biggest fears was a bridge collapse similar to this one. Probably you were thinking more catastrophic. But was this one of your biggest fears as you served as governor?
Oh, absolutely. If you remember up in Minneapolis, they had a major bridge fail. Mm-hmm. Sometime, I think this century, maybe at the end of the 1990s. But as I was running for governor, I was talking about we need to rebuild our infrastructure. The number one role of government, I think I say it every time we're here, is public safety. It can be from civil unrest, it can be from criminals, but it's also you're riding on safe roads and safe bridges. When I was governor, we passed an infrastructure bill. And myself and Rich Fitzgerald and local leaders, if we did one press conference under the Liberty Bridge, we did 5 or 6 that I was starting to feel like, the bridge is going to fall down on us at any point. And that's what we were concerned about, that could happen. Lo and behold, we had the Fern Hollow Bridge go down, knowing that it had been inspected a couple of years before and listed as poor, and nothing happened at that period of time. Crucial artery for the people that come in from the east to downtown and vice versa. How you didn't take a look at that is beyond me.
Jim, I'm going to bring you in on this one because as state Democratic Party chairman, you obviously had some politics involved in how local politicians do this, but also you served as president of Allegheny County Council. So your thoughts on what happened?
Sure. I was president of the Allegheny County Council, and I chaired the county's Public Safety Committee. And whenever we saw any potential for a hazard or a risk, for example, when we had the issues with the convention center and other infrastructure issues, we would hold meetings in the Public Safety Committee, bring the principals in and ask very direct questions about what did you know, when did you know it, and what steps are being taken. We tried to be very proactive in that regard. We tried to keep people accountable and moving forward. The governor says it every time we're here, and the governor is absolutely right. Government is about public safety. As mayor, my objectives were always to have a safe community, well-trained, visible police officer presence in the town, clean streets, paved roads, quiet neighbors, safe community for residents and the business district alike. Very basic mayoring 101. Pay attention to the details on the ground that the community put you there for, and you will be successful. Unfortunately, Mayor Peduto was never able to do that for whatever reason. He lacked the intellectual curiosity to do the basic things, or he was more preoccupied with these international trips and getting into Twitter battles with enemies perceived and real. But whatever the reason, he failed miserably, in my opinion, on what needed to be done for the infrastructure here. And thank God that that situation at Fern Hollow didn't result in any fatalities or serious injuries. We may have been an hour away in the rush hour from something much more catastrophic or some other time of day than what we witnessed last week. But as a state chairman, one of the issues that we used to pay attention to were which candidates are paying attention to issues such as infrastructure. It sounds boring on its face, I get that, but when you talk about that type of thing and providing that type of service to your constituents for whatever office you're running for, it is certainly a talking point and a plank in your platform that is always untouchable.
All right, Keith, I'd like for you to wrap this up for us.
Well, Joe's article is a welcome reminder that although it's an important office with gravitas, esteem, power, it's also a local office. In the end, it's one of the highest local offices, but it is a local office. And to all my fellow colleagues here, I'll reiterate, it's about safe and clean and maintained streets and parks that are open, garbage off my curb. You do the basics, they'll love you forever. But if you miss those things, their opinions of you can change on a dime, and they should. They're only expecting the certain basic things to be taken care of day after day. And when they're not, it really could punch you in the face. And this is really a wake-up call for the new mayor. I mean, if infrastructure wasn't a priority or he didn't know where it would rank, although he did say it was important, it now has moved to the front burner. He understands how important it is to look at those roads and bridges in the city and take another second look. There's 3,198 bridges in poor condition in Pennsylvania. 131 of them are in Allegheny County. You know, I'm wondering now, when I left my home a week and a half ago to try to get on the Parkway at the Roslyn exit, for some odd reason, my bridge leading onto the Parkway West is closed. And I'm wondering if that was on the list. I know it was a little dicey. It needed some repairs, but maybe they did an assessment and that could be closed until it's replaced. There's been no media on it, so I'm still waiting to hear. But you're going to have to take a hard look at all these bridges in Allegheny County that are rated in poor condition, and dovetail to the federal side where we passed a $1.2 trillion infrastructure, and they're talking about now a higher for social infrastructure. Listen, we can put another 1.2 trillion on top of that for regular infrastructure. Well, and if that wasn't the case, if you're wondering whether that was appropriate or not, you only have to look to the what could have been a real tragedy on Fern Hollow, which we escaped without loss of life. But $1.2 trillion doesn't do it. As I looked at that bill, you have to look at where we can redirect some of those dollars to. You know, one of the things that I saw an article about $7.5 billion in the infrastructure bill for electric car stations, charging stations. Listen, put that $7.5 billion in bridges. let the private sector take care of electric charging stations. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. In the end, we have to take care of the basic roads, bridges that are safe for the public in America is number one priority. And I hope we take it seriously in the days and months and weeks ahead.
All right, Keith, thanks. I'm going to change the subject now. Does House Speaker Nancy Pelosi know something that most of us don't? She announced that she's again going to run for office in Congress in a year in which the early prognostication is that Republicans will take control of Congress in 2023. But as states are redrawing their congressional boundaries, several states with Republican majorities in their state legislatures, including here in Pennsylvania, they are now facing court challenges to their new congressional maps that they've drawn. And those challenges are now winding up before each state's Supreme Court, which in many cases, like here in Pennsylvania, are controlled by justices who are members of the Democratic Party. Those justices are throwing out the Republican drawn maps, and that opens the door for Democrats to either maintain or in some cases gain congressional seats and thus keep control of Congress. Add to that potential challenges by the Biden administration the Biden administration's Justice Department to congressional maps in red states that are not facing being overturned by the courts in their states. So, Keith, I'm going to go back to you right away. Are the Democrats going to keep control of Congress?
Not a chance, at least not of the lower house. I mean, it's a numbers game right now. Midterms are referendums on the party that occupies the White House. And, Reuters yesterday had the president's approval rating, I think, at 43%. Listen, if he's in the high 30s or early 40s on approval, that dog don't hunt for the Democrats. If he's not anywhere near 50 or above 50 in this November, where there's no indication that that's going to change anytime soon, it's going to be a banner year for the Republicans. The upper house, the Senate, is a little bit more in play, although I believe that the Republicans will be successful in obtaining a majority there after this November. I don't think it's guaranteed, but the lower house, I think, is gone. It's just a numbers game. I mean, with inflation where it stands at a 40-year high, with the supply chain issues, the inconsistency on COVID, energy prices through the roof, the southern border concerns, the international concerns, it's just piling up and piling up. And once people form a hard opinion on the leadership of the president, it's hard to move them from that opinion. So right now, I think it's going to be a long night for Republicans come November in the House of Representatives.
Jim, your take.
Keith, I think you meant to say long night for Democrats, but I'll accept what you said.
Oh, did I?
I think that was a Freudian slip.
That was a Freudian slip.
It's too soon. I think it's too soon, Stacy. I mean, by all indications, sitting here today, I think Keith would be right. But these are snapshots, moving picture. Voters are like creditors. They'll remember the last thing you did right before the election. You could have a great cycle, 2, 4, 6 years. And if you run into some type of a debacle right up before the election, you could be in trouble. That's why we call them the October surprises. Let's see how things are trending. We had a jobs report in January from Mr. Biden, which was historic, 500,000 jobs. Fox News the night before was already getting ready to pan the president for what was going to be a disaster. Didn't happen. Crickets on that issue now. The Omicron variant seems, knock wood, to be waning. It is very possible that this president could stand up in front of the nation as we get into the fall push and say that I fulfilled the promise to get this virus under control. The inflation issue, if he can get a handle on that, in addition to these continued upticks in jobs, we're now just about at pre-COVID levels on the economy and jobs. If he can catch up to that, about 1.8 million to go, he could get there at this rate. He could say he's gotten us out of one of the worst crises in the history of the Republic, and that will bode well for him. And he'll have tails, which he doesn't have as good. They're not as good right now. They could be much better and longer in October. And then let's look at your question about the courts and about the redistricting. Many of these courts are Democrat. I understand that. But I've seen situations where Republican Supreme Courts have taken Republican maps and tossed them. It happened here in Pennsylvania about 10 years ago on Mr. Terzai's first proposed map. The GOP-controlled Supreme Court tossed it. Other states are doing that. And when you have the Justice Department jumping in on issues like this, that is a message, a very strong, concerning message to me that GOP-drawn maps in some states are so far afield or so far off from constitutional precedent and Supreme Court precedent that the Justice Department sees clear violations where they have to come in and pull these out of control maps back. Traditionally, the party that does not have the White House does gain in off year. Only once in the last 50 years did I think that not happen. Keith, I think that might have been Reagan in 82.
Reagan.
So other than that, it normally happens. With a 5-seat margin in the House, yeah, it doesn't look promising, but we have a long way to go. And the Senate, I think, is going to stay with the Democrats.
Governor, your thoughts?
Well, mine are a little bit different. I think the two gentlemen before me really covered a lot about what's going to happen with MEPS. I'm surprised that she wants to stay there. I have come more and more to we need term limits. She is 81 years old right now, and she says, I want another 2 more years. It doesn't show any change in leadership in the Democratic Party. And I would imagine progressives may be looking at her and saying, it is time for you to move on. But it is, I have a hold on Congress. Even if I'm not the leader, if I'm not the speaker, I'm still the minority leader. That's all about power. And very disappointing that she hasn't decided that this would be a good time to end it.
Joe?
I think it's essential for the party that she hang in there, at least for now. You know, there was a time when I was more concerned about older leaders, and my opinion's changing as the years advance. So you know, and I think that if she leaves, there's a great risk that the Democratic Party will swing too far to the left. Right now, she's the only thing keeping us near the center, and I know she has left the center, but she's certainly not where the squad is. And if we move too far to the left, I think you can count us out for a while, just as you can count out the Republican Party if they move too far to the right. But as for reapportionment, you know, for the last 2 reapportionments, the Republicans held sway over the Democrats in Pennsylvania. It's a political process. As the politics change, that can change. It's all about one person, one vote. You know, if you're an honest broker, you just want one person, one vote. You want this to be done right. But you have to resist also the temptation to overplay your hand. I think in those states where the Republicans are in trouble with their maps, it's because they've overplayed their hand. And the courts finally are starting to weigh in on these, and they're going to bring everybody back towards the center.
So back to the basic question I asked, are the Democrats going to take control of Congress, Joe?
I think they have a shot of maintaining control. I do. It's a tough fight. What Keith said is all true, but it is a bit early because what Jim said is true as well. You know, there's last minute surprises. President Biden is right now showing incredible steadiness and strength in this international crisis in the Ukraine. I think those kinds of things come to bear too in a national election.
Let me say, Stacy, though, going back to Nancy Pelosi, listen, I, like most Republicans, am no fan of Nancy Pelosi, but I'm sure that's a very welcome news to Democrats that she's running for one more term, because there's one thing I do know. No one in the history of the House of Representatives, no speaker on either side of the aisle has raised more money for her colleagues than Nancy Pelosi. She's the single greatest fundraiser in the history of the House of Representatives. So I would have liked her to go back home to California, but apparently she's going to be helping a lot of her fellow colleagues put money in their coffers.
You'd like her to switch sides and raise money for you guys.
Sure.
Well, now, since the last time we talked, both state parties have held their meetings in which both parties did not endorse a candidate for U.S. Senate. Jim, as a former state Democratic Party chairman, is this a setback for either Congressman Connor Lamb or Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman?
I don't believe so. In the state Democratic Party, there is a 2/3 rule. They call it the Rendell rule because Governor Rendell instituted it when he was governor. And that is after 2 ballots. Once you have a quorum, let's say hypothetically that you have 99 for a quorum, you get 99 people there. You're going to need 66, 2/3 to vote for you to get endorsed. And you have 2 ballots to do it. And when you had a crowded field that we had, you had 4. You had Val Arkush, you had Malcolm Kenyatta, Connor Lamb, and John Fetterman. I would have not expected an endorsement, even after 2. And what oftentimes you see after the first ballot is the lower vote getter. If they don't get to a certain threshold, they automatically drop off. Watch what that person does with his or her votes. Will they go towards a front runner to get them over the 2/3 on the second ballot? Or will they cast their votes for someone else to keep them from getting it and have an open primary? Val Arkush, I think, only had 15, so she was out on the first ballot. Those 15 were inconsequential on the second round. What's significant to note is how well Connor Lamb did, and we've talked about this. We've talked about the soft support that we perceive John Fetterman having. It manifested itself in that vote. I think it's good that it stays open because when in a crowded field, it can be more difficult sometimes after a contentious primary to mend fences. Not having an endorsement mitigates that potential issue. But pay close attention to the insensitive, callous remarks, in my opinion, that the Fetterman team made after not getting it. They made statements to the effect of, well, that's the inside hotel game, or that's the insider game. We're not part of that. Nothing could be further from the truth, John. What you have here are 250 to 350 state committee men and women from 67 counties, in addition to the ethnic caucuses who come to those meetings. You have the minority caucus, the LGBT caucus, the progressive caucus, the women's caucus, the rural caucus, the senior caucus. And those are outreach caucuses that are not just state committee people. They come to those meetings to interface with leadership to form an agenda for the entire Commonwealth. The statement you made was insensitive and does not help you with these folks who go back into their counties and their districts and talk about who's a better candidate. Keep an eye on Connor Lamb. He's starting to gain momentum. He's doing very well out in the East. He's not missing meetings. He's not missing breakfasts and making excuses for it. So keep an eye on the polls. I do not think it's detrimental that nobody got the endorsement for all those reasons.
Governor, your take.
Well, on our side of the aisle, there were so many people, I think 14 people in the governor's race, 4 or 5 people in the Senate race. I never anticipated they would have an endorsement in that process. There would never be enough traction. We don't have a 2/3 rule that I remember at this point in time. We have a number of attractive candidates and we have some average candidates. And they're going to have to go out there and beat the bushes and go to all of the different dinners that take place between now and primary day, raise the money, get the funds, put it into TV ads, and we're already being inundated with TV ads on both sides of the aisle. But it's, best man or woman, may they win. And I think that's what's going to happen. Joe.
Yeah, well, the state committee endorsement process is not always predictive. I would have rather had it than have lost it, as I did in 1993 when I was running for Commonwealth Court. I had Governor Ed Rendell's support when I was running, but when we got to state committee, he supported another candidate, to my chagrin. When I approached him, I said, Ed, what's up with this? I thought you were for me. And he said, well, I am for you. He says, don't worry about it. He says, what happened here was about Philadelphia politics. He says, I had things I had to do here as a city politician. He says, but I'm still going to be for you in the race. So I'm not sure that it's always the indicator we'd like it to be.
I'm so shocked to hear that story.
We all are.
Keith.
I think Jim and I predicted several weeks ago, we didn't see an endorsement coming in the Senate race, and it didn't come. I think it was a smart move. The state committees on both sides of the aisle are probably more in play for off-year elections for judges when those folks running for judge don't have the organizational strength that candidates for governor and senator have. Most people rely on their own organization and don't rely on state committee so much. And for Republicans, it's really hard to rely on state committee because we're a shadow of what we were. My esteemed colleague, Governor Corbett, who's part of this panel, is the only time in the last 20 years, those 4 years, that we've held the governor's mansion. And largely it's the governor that controls state committee, helps fund state committee, and helps make it viable. And the fact that we've been out of power for 16 of the last 20 years has taken a real toll on the Republican state committee. So they don't really have the power or control that they once had. That may change if we elect a governor this fall.
All right. Money is, of course, the lifeblood of politics. And Governor, the latest fundraising reports have come out in the contest for the Republican nomination for governor. 5 candidates have raised at least $1 million. Some candidates have raised more than $3 million, and some are already beginning now to spend some of that money. You successfully ran for governor. So what kind of funding is it going to take for a Republican to become governor?
Well, to become governor all the way, probably about $30 million. Yeah.
I think that's low.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
and that's, I mean, I was $30 million, so it's probably more than that. It
Right.
takes fundraising at the local level, at the county level, at the state level, and at the national level. The nominee for the Republican Party will probably have assistance from the Republican Governors Association if they view that this nominee has a better than 50-50 chance of winning. And if they weigh in. You also do raise a lot of money from around the country. People want to support Republican governors. People want to support Democrat governors. So the organization that you create within your own campaign is very important in raising that money. The other thing that governor candidates have to do is they have to be on the phone at least a couple of hours a day, talking to potential donors and trying to get that kind of money in. It is, to me, the hardest part of being a politician is asking people for money.
So true. So true. And Governor, I think 30 million might be the low bar. I think, the GOP with President Trump's victory here in 2016, the first time that the state went red since '88, and some of the close margins we've seen in some other statewide races in this past year, where the GOP won all but one of the statewide judge seats. I think there's no doubt in my mind the GOP sees Pennsylvania as purple and one that they can get back in their column. And with everything going on, I suspect that if they do have a viable candidate coming out of your primary, that you'll see RGA money, you'll see RNC money, you'll see national money, and you will see a lot of it. Josh Shapiro has been touting his fundraising, which has been incredible and historic and record-breaking this early in the game. So they know that the GOP that they're going to need to be well prepared financially to support their candidate. And the call time is something that whomever the nominee will be is going to have to do. And Governor, you've done it. I used to sit as state chairman for hours with those call sheets in the finance chair and just page after page after page. But it's a necessary evil at this level of politics and running for office.
Yeah, my sense is that between the Democrat and Republicans, you're looking at $100 million total for governor. I think you're going to eclipse $100 million if you add the Democratic spend and the Republican spend together. And I think the next 5 weeks will tell the tale. I mean, in the next 5 weeks, the people that want to be governor have to put enough money in the bank to put themselves on television in the middle of March and not come down until election day. And let me tell you, in Pennsylvania, that's a big number. And if you can't stay on television for 2 months, you don't have a chance to win the primary in May. So these next 5 weeks are critically important. And it's not so important about people that are infusing their own money into the campaign. I'm going to be very interested to see the amount of donors and who's given to who, because in the end, that's a way to show your support. You've gone in front of somebody, you've differentiated your campaign from the other people running, and they were willing to write a check, which they can't write off in any way, shape, or form. They're giving your candidacy shows an advocacy for you and support that otherwise is hard to categorize. So I'm going to look at how well these candidates do in raising money, how many donors they raise from, what the average donation is. But I'm telling you, I would say the next 35 days are critical. If they don't have enough money, you're going to see people probably bowing out early in this sweepstakes.
Joe, I'm going to go to you, but you have about 1 minute.
No, Keith's absolutely right in his analysis of the role of money in this campaign. Josh Shapiro is certainly on a roll. The worst thing he could do, however, is assume that he's the presumptive governor. There are a couple guys on the other side who can write their own checks and match about anything he'd raise. So it's still going to be a race.
Gentlemen, thank you. I want to again say that you did a great job here today. We covered a lot of subjects, and I also want to thank you for watching. And I hope that you join us again for the next edition of Around the Table with Stacy Smith.
Thanks, Stacy.
Thank you, Stacy.